membership, Wendy. Congratulations. So how this works is I will start the meeting and we will do the election of the board chair. And as soon as that's done, I'll switch back to my seat. It's the board chair that runs the election for the vice chair and the secretary. So that's what we'll do. The first thing to start the meeting is to stand and please pledge of allegiance. The flag is behind the door, so please close the door. That would be great.
It's your first test.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will let you know that public comment will occur during the public comment portion of the meeting, and it's done via raising your hand remotely or in person during public comment. Once acknowledged, state your name and ward so that you included in the minutes, and please limit your time to 3 minutes. The public comment is governed by policy BEDH. Additions and deletions, I will mention that our student representative is elsewhere right now, but we hope that he's able to attend a little bit later, so that might be moved. And after my superintendent's update, also will be the math update, and our Director of Equity, Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, Ms. Karen Dubois, is across the hall, and I'll invite her over to do the presentation. And then hopefully after that, we can do the approval of the K-6 math program and go on from there.
Joanne. All right. There are two things under new business. A is approval of K-6 math program, and B is discussion and action approve K-6 math pilot program.
C should have been deleted.
Okay,
Thank you.
so just C should have been deleted?
Correct.
Okay.
They're both representing the same topic. Okay, for election of officers, is there someone who'd like to make a motion for board chair, please?
I'd like to make a motion for Lil Mon to be our board chair.
Is there a second? Is there anyone else who would like to make a motion for board chair? Mary?
I have a motion, but I'd like to make a statement first.
Okay. Can you speak into your mic?
Yeah. Before I make the nomination, I'd like to just talk about something that I think is important to remember, that the board is not a place to play politics or micromanage our district, superintendent, or administration while they are delivering or overseeing the education of our students in a positive direction. There's no place for rumors that cause chaos. The board is to set positive goals for its own improvement and evaluate themselves. Individual board members' goals and agendas are also deterrents, taking away from the work to be accomplished. I believe we can create a vision with all stakeholders, including our students. I expect our newly hired superintendent will guide our district alongside all the stakeholders in creating a district vision we can aspire to. And I'd like to nominate MJ.
Is there a second? Steve? My understanding of the process is I say all those in favor of Lil, and then hands are raised, and then all those in favor of MJ, and then hands are raised. That's my understanding. I'm looking for the board to make sure that that's appropriate. Okay. All those in favor of Lil being board chair, please raise your hands. 1, 2. My understanding of the process is I say all those in favor of Lil, and then hands are raised, and then all those in favor of MJ, and then hands are raised. That's my understanding. Looking for the board to make sure that that's appropriate. And I'm going back over to the left. All those in favor of Lil being board chair. 1, 2. My understanding of the process is I say all those in favor of Lil, and then hands are raised, and then all those in favor of MJ, and then hands are raised. That's my understanding. Looking for the board to make sure that that's appropriate. And I'm going back over to the left. All those in favor of Lil being board chair. 1, 2. My understanding of the process is I say all those in favor of Lil, and then hands are raised.
I'd like to nominate MJ for vice chair.
Okay, do I have a second? There's who you wants to do it.
Doesn't matter.
I'll do it.
Okay, all right, Lisa, seconded by Lisa. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? All right, then we'll have a vote. All those in favor of MJ for vice chair? Okay, 9-0. Okay, great. We'll move on to secretary. Is there a motion for secretary?
I'd like to nominate Mary Eads for secretary.
Is there a second? Steve? Okay. Is there anyone else for secretary? All right, we'll have a vote for secretary. All those in favor of Mary Eads? All right, unanimous, 9-0. All right,
You did want to do that, right?
I might make some changes.
Congratulations, everyone. Thank you.
Same to you.
Okay.
So Lil, you're going to move the student.
Yes, we've already said we're going to move it down until whenever he arrives. Yeah. All right, so correspondence. Well, Mary was. She doesn't have to. So I was secretary. There is only one letter in the correspondence folder, which was a letter from the former chair to the candidate for superintendent, finalist for superintendent who was not selected, thanking him for his candidacy. That's all that was in the correspondence folder. All right, that will move us on to the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the public hearing minutes and public minutes from March 8th, 2023?
I'll make a motion to approve the public minutes from March 8th, 2023.
Second.
Steve, second. And motion by MJ.
I don't think we did public comment.
Oh, we skipped over public comment.
I was expecting it weeks ago, and we didn't think so, so.
We're going to, let's finish this and then we'll go back to public comment. How about that? Yep. Okay, so motion by MJ, seconded by Steve. Are there any corrections or emendations to the public hearing minutes or the public minutes from March 8th? Seeing none, all right. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please raise your hand. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 3 abstentions.
Can I, Joanne, there's clarification. Do we usually do the hearing minutes as a separate minute?
Ask Tim. I don't know what you need, Tim, for the public hearing and minutes.
I think we usually do them separately, but as long as the minutes tonight reflect that both the minutes
Even if we don't have it here? I mean, it's noted on here.
Did we have public hearing
They're not
minutes?
in here, so
All right, I'll put them in with Lori for the next
we
meeting.
can approve them if we haven't
Thank
seen
you.
them.
So then we're only approving.
Okay.
Well, and that's all my motion was for, was just, oh, did I say?
You said
No, I
both.
said the regular.
Did you say that?
I said the I read off the top of the, so it was the regular minutes
Okay.
was my
So
motion.
we're going to go back. Just make sure we're all voting for the right thing. So we had a motion to approve just the public minutes from the March 8th, 2023.
No.
No?
No, they're the regular minutes, so
Regular.
I
Not
can
the-
have a do-over
Sorry,
if
not
you
the,
want.
it says public hearing and public minutes, so just minutes.
Right.
Let's say, from
Right.
regular. Okay, the minutes from the March 8th.
The ones that are
2023.
in
It
the
gets
packet.
I know. The ones in the packet. And the second was by Steve. You still stand by your second. Well, let's do the vote one more time. All those in favor? All right, 6 of us and 3 abstentions. Okay. All right, we're going to stop for 7B and go back because we skipped over public comment. So, is there any public comment in the room?
I don't see any people coming forward, and I do not see any hands raised on Zoom.
Okay. All right, so
And so with the new minutes, do we have to, in policy, when we're talking about now, do we have, because we hold the 30 minutes to the end of
think you take it to the end, and then give people another opportunity, and if they don't, then you can
Do we have
close
to
it.
officially like table the,
It's too complicated for me in the policies I mentioned, like, how are we gonna pull this forward? So it's a great conversation to have. My understanding was that there's a certain amount of time set aside, and if people want to talk, we're gonna say, sure, if you want to come back at the end, we'll make sure that that time is done. We don't hold that time here, we just say, no public comment, and then we move on to the agenda.
So-
I don't think that means that at the end, we automatically add 30 minutes when people aren't here, 20, or people aren't here at the beginning of it to respond. I think it's a folder to make sure everyone has a voice at some point. But I also recollect that at any time, when we have a large group, the board elects at that time to extend public comment, because we don't want people to wait. We're grateful that they come. The board can say, I just want to extend this public comment, and we do so. We did that quite a bit during COVID, to make sure that everyone was heard, because it can be frustrating if the board makes, it stops and starts and stops and starts, because we're not sure what topic that people want to talk about. So, hoping that I clarified that correctly.
I
So-
think though, in our policy, under B3,
Right.
it says, if speakers do not fill the minimum 30-minute public comment period, the board will move to table the remainder of the time until the end of the meeting.
Right.
If insufficient,
Motion to table the time.
Right, so we, according to our policy, so we need a motion to table the time, and then we'll open it up at the end and close it and close it again.
That's going to be an issue, because the whole point of having public comment is to have people in the
I think,
beginning.
though that's the way the RSA changed.
Yeah, that's what.
Right.
But it's supposed to be the intent of the RSA, so that the board can start going through some topics, because the crowd's so large in the beginning. Not necessarily that people can show up in the middle of the meeting and then want to have 30 minutes at the end. So perhaps I can do it however you want today to make sure we're doing something, and I'd be happy to ask legal counsel, just so I can write the board,
Yeah, I think that's good.
clarify it, and it's a great question. It's a
Right.
wonderful time to ask it, because we don't have a huge number. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
so we can get legal clarification on B3,
Yes.
and what we should do in an instance like this, when there isn't
Because
enough.
we didn't change that part of, that was the way
That was
the
their
first
policy,
school board.
right?
Public hearing.
Yeah,
I would advocate that for today, we follow the
Yes.
protocol that's written in our
right,
policy.
I agree. So which means I need a motion to table the rest of public comment until the end of the meeting. Steve,
I move that we table the unused portion of our public comment to the end of the meeting.
okay?
And we just need to make a note.
Second.
And second is Mary, and we're gonna make a note at the time that we closed it, right? So
Well, we just have to, we'll need to make a note so we come back to it to officially
Yeah.
close it at the end.
Okay, so all those in favor of tabling the public comment until the end?
6:47.
All right, so that's 8-1. Are you abstaining? Okay, 8-1. And put it at the end of the meeting.
I think it can go after other business.
Okay, thank you, everyone. All right, so we're back to 7B, which is, I need a motion to approve the nominations and resignations.
I'll make a motion to approve the resignation dated on the sheet dated March 22nd, 2023.
Second.
Motion by MJ, seconded by Steve. Any comments, questions about the resignation?
Joanne, has that position been posted yet?
Jack's position has been posted. Yes, we'll be posted for the next 2 weeks. I've already reached out to the staff to find out who would like to be on that staff committee. We'll be sending out a notice this week to ask for a parent for the committee. Hope to bring it up today to see if there's a member of the board who'd like to be on that committee. It's going to be during the day. We have applications already coming in, which is good news. And, yeah, I think that covers where we are. I am also gearing up to send out a survey for the staff that they usually fill in, so we'll be doing that next week.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And there will be an exit interview.
Anyone who's leaving the district is welcome to have an exit interview. Jack is becoming a superintendent in Chichester. Great. Lab, the renovations are moving forward in a timely manner. We met on Tuesday and caught up with the different parts of the project. It's very exciting to see it. We met on the same day at Hanover Street and the high school. At that meeting, we had the City of Lebanon, Marinese Architects, and Ekman Construction. We're beginning to discuss the renovation project, which will break ground potentially this May or June. We're looking at entry egress because the front of the high school at some point will not be able to be used because we're going to be building out that whole front entrance. So that's really important for us to figure out. The students will go in and out Senior Square, which is ADA accessible. And so we wanted to make sure that we're all in the same place with the city and the fire department and start those conversations early on. As far as other board-related and work, please note that this isn't all that I do. It's just some highlights every 2 weeks. Facilitated the COLT meeting, and that's our central office leadership team meeting. Participated in finance and facilities meeting. Prepared the policy committee meeting agendas, and I'm going to send those materials out today when I get back home. Our meeting is April 3rd. We've posted the principal position, set out inquiries for staff. We'll be sending out the parent search committee member invite. Conversations with Mount Leb Principal Katie Roach regarding staff and student matters. Conversation with Hanover Street School Principal Jack Finley regarding student matters. A conversation with Ian, Mike, Steve, and Diane about beginning to plan for the Lebanon High School track celebration. At this point, we're trying to organize it at the same time that there's an actual competition. So we'll have teams from other schools, so it'll be an exciting thing to share with everyone. The conversation with Karen to talk about the math pilot we're going to be hopefully approving this evening and other matters. And been in conversation with LMS administrators regarding the student matter. I met with legal counsel to discuss the tie vote that we had and try to provide guidance and also in regard to a personnel matter. Deb Laffin, who you might know as our director of the Lebanon Adult Education Program. A few years ago, we talked about funding for that program. She's been able to fund it without district funding, which is fabulous. She's going for a New Hampshire DOE continuing grant, and she was looking for people to write letters of support and references. So I sent that to her, and we finished up the paperwork in regard to that. Any questions? Steve?
Are they targeting any particular dates tentatively for the track dedication?
I think it might have been April 24th or 25th. I can't remember.
It's the last week of April. It's somewhere around the 24th. It's a home meet, the first home meet.
And we're looking at a potential second date if there's some kind of weather issue that we hope to avoid, but just in case.
April 25th, I think was the date. According to my calendar.
Any other questions for the superintendent?
I just wanted to tell you congratulations on the beautiful renovation at Mount Leb, because I went and I read to some kids for the Wild About reading, but then I went and I looked around to all the renovation. It was really beautiful and inspiring and exciting. I can't wait for my kids to get to see it.
Yeah, I bring that gratitude back to the community and the board for supporting it, so thank you. It is very exciting. I look forward to bringing back pictures so that you can see what they have up most recently is just the blue backing is around there. They have the curtain up that's going to come down, that's going to divide the two, and they're starting to work on the kitchen flooring. If there are any other questions, I'll go get Karen, and we'll come back and talk about the math pilot.
Wendy, do you have a time for the track celebration?
I just know that that's the date of the meet.
Okay.
They were going to have it beforehand, right? Before the trucks, like at 3:45 or something like that, but they didn't decide on it yet.
Will they take into consideration, do you know, of like the kids that are warming up for the first event? So will they have it early enough that people can sort of be stopped?
There was one meeting about it, and so I don't have the answer to that. You know, I'm sure Stoney is aware of that sort of stuff. I'll certainly put Claudia's here.
Yeah, and to ask Loza, because I don't know. I know that they have specific warm-up procedures that they like to follow, and that alternate is running around somewhere.
So in your packet are some materials in regard to the math pilot program that provides a bit of an overview of where we began with it. And Karen will review that and then talk a bit about why the committee selected the program that they did and answer any of your questions. Welcome, Karen.
Hi there. I'm Karen Dubois. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm the District Director of Equity, Curriculum Instruction, and Assessment.
Karen, can you pull your mic a little bit closer?
Sure. Hello.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Just to repeat, I'm Karen, and I'm the Director of Equity, Curriculum Instruction, and Assessment. I'm here to tell you about the math pilot program that recently wrapped up and the Math Resource Adoption Committee's recommendation to the board for a new math resource for our students and teachers in grades K through 6. Just to review and recap our objectives in pursuing this, there's a bucket of grant funding that is available to us that's earmarked for pandemic-era learning loss. And the decision was taken to look at replacing our existing math resource, which is aging, frankly. It's been in use for about 9 years in the district. It's called Envisions Math, and it is aging to the point where the publisher is no longer going to support teachers and students with this program, and they're really sunsetting it. So it was a good time to look at this. And we really want to be sure that we're ensuring access to a high-quality instructional resource because we know that makes a tangible difference in student outcomes. The pilot program was begun, the Math Resource Adoption Program was begun about a year ago. A committee was formed. They conducted a comprehensive vetting process of a number of resources and identified, using a rubric that they created that reflects best practices, identified 2 top programs that they wanted to pilot in our schools this year. Those programs were piloted in 3-month sequential chunks, one through the first part of the year and the second through the winter. That committee reconvened in early March to review the results. Using a collaborative decision-making process, the committee was able to reach a consensus decision to recommend that we move forward with Eureka Squared as our math resource for grades K through 6. Strengths of the program include it is in its 2nd iteration, meaning that the publishing company and the authors of the program have had a chance to troubleshoot and work out some kinks and augment the program, so we're getting the benefit of that. The first edition of the program received great reviews from Ed Reports, which is one of the most well-regarded sort of curriculum vetting resources out there. And the results from our pilot data were pretty strongly in favor of this program over the other top candidate. It met the criteria within our evaluation rubric at either mostly meeting or meeting the criteria at a rate of about 2-to-1 over the other candidate program. Some highlights of the program are outlined in your board packet materials. They include that it's cohesive and systematic. So concepts are presented in a sequential way that's very intentional for our students and continues from one grade to the next. Using a consistent approach, which reduces the cognitive load for our students and allows them better bandwidth, so to speak, for encountering those new math concepts. There's an idea in the field around productive struggle. We want our students to be in math class really engaged in productive struggle for most of their learning time, and this program embraces that approach. There's pacing guides and teacher tools that will promote better alignment between teachers and across our district. And the assessment package is pretty robust with a lot of options for teachers to pursue, including digital, benchmark, and summative observational checklists, et cetera. Some of the highlights from our pilot program teachers, just looking through and sort of examining their testimonials, they noted that a concern around the prior program and the other pilot program was the readability. We don't want a student's reading level to constrain their access to math learning, and this resource seemed to be accessible to all learners. They describe having on-ramps for both the concepts and the readability to allow access to a wide range of learners, from our multilingual students to our students with identified learning disabilities, across a wide range. And those teachers in particular noted that this program had strengths in that area. The two programs were cost comparable, and we anticipate that the program will be fully funded for materials and professional learning through available grants for the first 2 school years of implementation. Thereafter, it'll need to be built into our district curriculum, beginning with the school year 2025-6. I think I'm just going to pause there. To be clear, our implementation timeline, the Math Resource Adoption Committee identified very carefully a program for professional learning to transition our teachers to this new math resource that would begin this spring, continue into the fall, and we'd be implementing the program with students starting in August when we return to school next year. That was a mouthful. I'm sure folks may have questions, and I'm happy to answer them.
So I have 2 questions. One is curriculum and one is financial. So the curriculum one, you talked about the on-ramps for all students. What about, how does the program handle those students that need more acceleration in math?
That's a great question. I think that the feedback was between the 2 programs that we were looking at, this one seemed to have the greater package of resources available for teachers. One of the things that we're looking to do is reduce teacher burden. There's some impressive statistics about the amount of time each week that teachers spend looking for supplementary resources. So we wanted to find a program that would reduce that need. And this seemed to be the better option in that regard, including to meet the needs of our advanced learners.
And then my second question is probably more for Tim. So on the costs in year 3, 4, and 5, is that what a typical math program costs us, or will this be a net new expense in the budget in those years?
Those are current program costs.
Right. Are those comparable, I guess, to our current program costs, or would those be in addition?
I mean, those numbers, I can't answer that without digging in to see what, has been put in the budget in prior years from the curriculum director. But those numbers don't seem, like we talked about this morning, those numbers don't scare me at all as far as what we usually spend on sort of curricular materials. But as far as the exact numbers, I want math versus reading versus something else, I couldn't tell you, so, based on right now.
Now, we just mentioned that a couple of years ago, when we were talking about using ESSER, I brought it to the board that this was a possibility, so the biggest lift is going to get paid out of the ESSER grants. The grant has already been written and approved. And so it's the first year, that's just the most, because you're buying everything for every grade. And then it's supplemental materials or workbooks that you have to replace, or if it gets expanded by a grade, but the bulk of it will come out of those funds, which should help us out.
Are there any other questions for Karen? I just wanted to say, again, thank you for you to relay our thanks to the Curriculum Adoption Committee, because they've done that. And I know there's a real name for it, I can never remember what the name is.
You know what, neither can I. It's the Math Resource Adoption Committee and the Math Pilot Program faculty. Those are 2 distinct groups of teachers. It's about nearly 40 teachers in all between the 2 groups, and they did work very hard on this.
So we'd like to convey our thanks to both groups of teachers for their hard work in making this decision.
Thank you.
And that for your leadership too. Thank you very much, appreciate it. Is it okay if we do the vote while she's here? Sure. She goes back to class and then we can tie that up?
Does anybody have anything else to add to the discussion about the vote?
I was going to make the motion.
Yeah, that's fine. Excellent.
So I would like to make a motion to adopt the Eureka 2 Math Resource Program.
For grades K to 6.
For grades K to 6.
So we have a motion, do we have a second? Steve? Okay. Any additional discussion before we move forward? Or any additional questions for Karen?
I guess
Yeah.
So I guess just how does this mesh then this is K through 6, so how does this mesh with 7 through 12?
That is also a great question. We did look at implementing this K to 8 initially. That was the thought heading into the pilot. What we found is that it's doesn't meet our needs as well in 7th and 8th grade, in part because we have a more differentiated set of pathways beginning in 7th grade that leads really well into our high school program. They have a body of curriculum and resources that are working and serving their students really well. So thankfully, those 7th, 8th grade math teachers and high school math was represented in the committee and in the decision making, so they were active participants in looking at both programs and considering which one makes that pathway the most high rigor and smooth for our students.
And they did try to actively pilot that.
They did, and just concluded that it stops meeting student needs quite as well, as it doesn't lead into Algebra 1 in our high school offerings as well as what we already have in place in 7th and 8th grade.
Steve had a question.
Yeah, I guess my question was, what is the typical life cycle of these programs? You said the last one was 9 years. This one, you've got pricing lined up for the first 6 years. Do we anticipate in years, by the end of 6 years, we're going to need to look for another one?
Well, that's, it's a funny thing. If you ask a publishing company, the life cycle is about 3 years because they'd love to sell us a new program every 2 or 3 years, but of course that's not necessary. The Lebanon School District has a really well-articulated curriculum review cycle that lasts about 5 years in most domains, and that would be a typical time to review and revamp. That's not to say that you necessarily execute a large upfront purchase every 5 years, but I would say that it's typical between 5 and 8 years to, in those core academic areas, to look at what you're doing and consider whether it's worthwhile to continue to reinvest in the program you've got or look to replace. So this feels well within what I would expect for a typical review process.
And then a second question, if I could. The prices that you quoted, I guess they're calculated based on like a per pupil rate? Is that per pupil cost fixed for the foreseeable future? So the only way that the cost changes is if we have more or less students?
No, they're not guaranteeing that the per pupil materials will stay priced as they are. We can hope that they will. So these are estimates. That's important to clarify. And we'll need to update them as we go forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Karen? Yes, Jessica?
This is a related question, and forgive me because I'm going to be learning as I go here in terms of how curriculum materials are priced and sold and everything else.
That's just great.
So is this a contract that I'm looking at the projected costs. Is this a contract that we are locked into for 6 years, or is this just we pay each amount each year? I understand these are projected costs, but if in year 3 something magical happens and we really want to switch to something else, are we still on the hook for the rest of these costs, or how does that work?
Absolutely, great question. No, it's a year-to-year contract, so we're not locked into anything. That said, of course, we want to choose a resource that we won't have to reconsider, we hope, for a good long while. But one of the things that can happen to those individual student costs is after we implement the program, it's often the case that a district finds they're using certain resources robustly, but some other ones perhaps not as much. Some programs have multiple workbooks, as this one does. It may be that cost year to year drops, although I wouldn't want to guarantee that because we want to make sure we have the materials that we need. I think that I've priced this on the the high end of what we can expect, so that if anything, it would be lower. But we're not contractually locked into anything beyond the immediate year ahead.
Great, thank you.
Is that true with professional development to get it up and running? Are we contracted for a period of time with that?
No, we are. It's an a la carte purchasing setup, and actually, because it's grant funded, what we can do is put in place a lot of robust professional learning through this first year and then make a good judgment about what was high value and what wasn't. Another thing that's beneficial about the Eureka Squared program is that they offer, in addition to their whole cohort professional learning experiences, they have a separate adjacent trajectory of coaching available, instructional coaching. So in years 3 or 4, when we bring on new faculty, we don't need to retrain everybody in the program, but we have individual needs. They have a pipeline and a pathway for that. There's a lot of good options there with professional learning.
about students who are sort of later towards the end of that K through 6 year? Are they transition, like the sixth graders will transition to this program for a year and then away from Envision 2 and then to this one and then on to the next one? Or are they like sort of sunsetted? Or is that?
I think, if I'm hearing the question correctly, you're asking for students who have come through most of their K-6 schooling with the old program, but are going to have a year or two with this new program, how will that affect them? The things that remain consistent from across all of these programs is the Common Core. Everything's aligned to the same set of standards and competencies that we need to be teaching to year. So there is a robust math curriculum that exists in the district. This is the resource that teachers will use to implement that curriculum, and those curricular standards and competencies won't be changing. So we're optimistic that it won't cause a big disruption. It's actually something that the committee spent a good amount of time talking about and considering. How do we ensure that there's not learning gaps? And we did look to make sure that the year-long content isn't going to be a big shift. So I don't think that will be detrimental to our students in 5th and 6th grade.
Another question, you mentioned there were 40 members of the committee. Was there sort of any dissent, or did everybody?
It was a fun day in that there were actually only 22 members of the decision-making committee. The rest were part of the math pilot program. So we were tasked with looking at the data from the pilot teachers with this decision-making group. And we used a calibration tool to sort of takes the temperature of the room, and a collaborative decision-making protocol that could have gone on all day till we reached consensus, and we had a backup plan if you can't reach consensus. They were able to reach consensus by about 10:45 in the morning, which was great, reflective of a pretty conclusive set of data. So consensus was a true consensus. There were not dissenters in the group by the time we walked through that process, a few iterations of it. That's not to say there weren't people who had different personal preferences. I actually think one of the greatest things about that, working with that group, was that there were people in the room who personally preferred the other program, as there always will be when you look at two options for really anything, and certainly for curriculum. And they were very able to look at the data from their colleagues, perhaps in a different grade level or with a different set of student needs, and recognize that both programs were really high quality. There wasn't a bad choice to make here, and that this program was the best for the greatest number of our students, or the greatest bandwidth of our students.
Any other questions for Karen? Okay, so we have a motion to accept the Eureka Squared Math Resource K through 6. All those in favor? Okay, unanimous, 9-0. Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll move to Tim, administrator update.
I usually once, for the new members, usually once a month between November and May, I provide a financial update. This is not that meeting. We're still in the middle of the month. So that's that. And then, follow up with the budget nonstop. So all I have for today is someone asked, I don't know if it was MJ, someone asked last time about the education freedom accounts that our law in New Hampshire now, and how has it affected the school district. And I knew that as a whole across the state, most of the EFAs, as they're called, have been utilized by people who already had their children in private school or homeschool. So I reached out to Mark Manganiello at the Department of Ed, who runs this sort of data stuff, and he said for the year we're in now, it looks back a couple of years, is what I guess it'll look back last year. So Lebanon, and for FY23, New Hampshire Ed found that Lebanon had approximately 2.57 students. I don't know what that looks like in students, but 2.57 students in the district for the EFA program. That resulted in a decrease of adequacy of about $9,700 for this year, but there's an EFA phase-out grant, an education funding account phase-out grant. It's a grant to sort of supplement that. So we're receiving 4,700, about half of that back from the state. For fiscal year '24, which is looking back to last year, so the year that starts July 1, they're not showing that any students left and took an EFA for this year that we're in there now. So next year we won't see any issue, at least that's the picture that he gave me 2 days ago. So it's minimal so far.
So were those kids already homeschooled or in
Well,
other?
no, that means that 2.57 students
In addition?
left. We lost adequacy for 2.57 students, so those are students that actually came out, left the district for the situation. Anybody who was already homeschooled or in a private school, we weren't getting adequacy aid for them anyway.
Okay.
So there might be more that are Lebanon residents, but we didn't see an impact to our financial bottom line
Okay.
that way.
Steve?
Do I understand it right that those, for example, those 2.57 students at $9,700, that becomes an annual, right? Because it's not a one-time loss to the district of funds. We continue to lose those funds every year.
Well, right, I mean, if it's $9,700 less every year.
Right.
Right. So I want to be careful because it's not 9,700 and then another 9,700. It doesn't, it just stays at a $10,000 deficit.
So wait, because I thought you said this for fiscal year '24 is 0 students left the
Well,
district.
you lose the adequacy 1 year, and so what he means is that for fiscal year '24, there's not any more additional. So,
And then the grant doesn't come back, or if we were
well,
to
they
lose,
need, so the phase-out grant helps you deal with the reduction in revenue.
just immediately though, in these
Immediately,
most
right,
years.
Right. And then if they come back in a year, we'll see the adequacy, because every year they give you a projection of what your adequacy is going to be for the following year based on average daily membership. And that's the number you see in the budget when I tell you what the state numbers are. That comes from Mark. So if those kids happen to come back, the way we'll know is that they'll, at the end of year I-4C report, it'll show those kids in the district, and then the numbers that are generated in the fall will show that. So it's a lot of words, and maybe I can show that better when we get to the budgeting time. At the end of the year, Pete, as the I-4C coordinator, reports what our average daily membership is to the state as one of our many monthly, annual reports. And then they calculate what that means for dollars, and we get a report in October, a preliminary report, and that goes in the budget. And then we get a more final report later.
So the grant is just now in the beginning of this whole process, and if we were to lose students, say in '25, '26, we're not going to get grant money then.
I don't know, honestly, how long this phase-out grant goes for. I can ask Mark that question. I don't know if it's 1 or 2 years or 5 years. I'm not familiar enough with the law to know how long that grant lasts, but I can ask him that.
Yeah, that would be nice.
The only other thing I just wanted to mention is I got the electronic copy of our audit from last September, so hopefully in the next board meeting, I'll be giving you an audit. There were 2 notes, I guess. One we brought up last year, and they brought it up again, so the board needs to act on it somehow, is that the auditors really want a deputy treasurer. So we have a treasurer that ran for office. Barbie Hazlett's been our treasurer for a long time. But best practice from the auditor's standpoint is that there's a deputy treasurer that is appointed. And I don't have any names in mind, so if you know of someone who might be good at that sort of thing, the treasurer reconciles the books every day, the bank statement every month to our general ledger. That's the main thrust of it. It's the biggest job we have for one of these elected jobs, the clerk and the treasurer and the moderator, or the treasurer, and there's a decent stipend that goes with it, a couple $1,000. But if you know someone that might be, and as a deputy, their only job would be to be trained by Barbie and know what to do. But the second time they mentioned that means please do something with it. And it would be good to have someone, if they actually like it, then maybe they can run for treasurer in the future when Barbie doesn't want to do it anymore.
So it's a backup to
The treasurer, right.
Okay.
Every check that gets issued out of this district has Barbie's name on it. She doesn't review it. She reviews the checks when she comes into the books once a month. It's not like you're in there every payroll. So, And then the other note they mentioned is our investment policy is supposed to be looked at every year, and that's on me. I need to bring the investment policy that we have, it has to go to the policy board every year by November, and I just gotta keep that on the radar, so. But those are pretty minor things, so, the rest of it is the reading. When you can't sleep at night, you can read.
So Tim, I just have one question about if you were going to give an estimate for the deputy treasurer position per month, how much time would you tell that person that they would be spending?
I would say the treasurer I guess we'll start from there. The treasurer spends probably 8 hours a month, but she knows it, she's good at it. So the deputy treasurer, if they're going to learn what to do and then keep their skills up, I'd say 2 to 4 hours a month probably.
And would you say somebody who's a CPA would be well equipped for something like that, or?
Probably yes.
Okay. Well, I have somebody in mind that I'm going to go see real soon for my own personal.
Give you, not to, hopefully Barbie's not minding me mentioning her name, but she's awesome at the job, and Barbie's not a CPA, but she runs the books for a company. So
Right.
someone who's a bookkeeper or CPA is perfect for that.
Okay,
It's the same
good.
sort of stuff.
Any other questions for Tim?
Okay. We are moving on to discussion of school board committee assignments. In our policy BDER, and policy BDE, they list the committee assignments that we have. For those of you who are new, who have not looked at that, we change those around, the composition of those committees every year. Get people and everything switches. So finance and facilities is one. Steve, do you want to tell us what you do in finance and facilities? No, yeah, go ahead, tell us.
We listen to Tim tell us what to do. Finance and facilities, basically we review financial and facility infrastructure type concerns and projects and requests and issues that come up and deal with some things internally, and when things are of a larger importance or a larger dollar value, we bring them to the board for more broader discussion.
And we meet with Tim and Joanne and Steve,
Our head of facilities.
Okay, education committee. Mary, do you want to tell us what we do on education committee?
Many things. We oversee, looking at the curriculum development and all the different areas, schedules sometimes, basically, and bringing forward motions to adopt maybe a new program that we need. And we look at handbooks and programs of study and upgrade those.
Perfect.
Anything else?
No, that's good. Next, personnel negotiations. MJ, you want to tell us what we do in Indiana?
Sure. So personnel negotiations handles the collective bargaining agreements along with our district attorney. This year, we just successfully negotiated and the voters accepted 3 out of our, I think it's 4 collective bargaining agreements. So actually, I think next year is kind of our off year for negotiation because we are current in all of our contracts for another year.
And then policy, Wendy, can you tell us what you do?
Policy, we deal with the policies that govern the district. And there's a cycle, so we have, Joanne, is it every 5 year you like to go through the whole, try to go?
So we've changed that to be New Hampshire School Board Association twice a year, sends updates. And we used to do the 5-year, but what I think we try to do now is as we pull something that's going to be new, we look at the rest of them that are connected to see if any of those need to be updated. But yes, at the same time, we try to do a 5-year review. There are hundreds of policies, and over the last 3 to 5 years, I would say there's such a focus on legislative changes that I know within the last 3, we've brought policies back that we've approved 2.5 years ago, only to bring them back because the legislative statute has changed. So it's hard to keep on top of it, although we do try. We have spreadsheets that we keep a hold of, and one of the things that we are moving forward with is called board docs. So our policies have been uplifted into that system. It's a template, and it also will include the board agenda. So instead of relying on Gmail, you'll go to Gmail to hop onto board docs. And so it takes time for them to process it, and then we'll have to have my assistant and others looking at the policies in chunks, because there's hundreds of them, and we want to make sure that what gets pulled over, what people see, matches what we actually had as a policy. So that will take time. It was something that came up a few months ago, and I used it a bit in Hanover, and so that would be great to bring back. So Lori and I went to the training, and we're moving forward with it.
Thank you. And then we have SWAC, which is the Student Wellness Advisory Committee. Lisa, do you want to tell us what you do?
We discuss things that have to do with student nutrition policy around wellness in the schools, and things like free and reduced lunch, how we are going to activate parents to apply for it, and we've been having some interesting conversations about what they're serving in the schools and why, and those sorts of things.
Thanks.
Nutrition.
All right. Then we have the HACTC, which is the Hartford Area Career and Technical Center. Did I get that right? Okay. I got Mary, can you tell us what they do at HACTC?
It's a group of people who, mostly superintendents, and there's a few community members who, or board members, who come together and look at what they've got for students in our area in the Upper Valley, and what they're looking to do, and build on their student population. And they've been trying to get back into the adult ed a little bit, because it kind of went away during COVID, so their classes were kind of curtailed. And they have a new person in charge of that right now, so it should be interesting to see where it goes.
What does it stand for?
Hartford.
Hartford
Area
Area Career and
Career.
Technical Center.
Yeah,
Yep.
because for new people it might be.
And Tim or Joanne, do you want to just mention how many students approximately we have in that program?
I think there's like 85 or something.
We have one of the larger numbers compared to the other communities.
Right.
Jessica, do you have a question? You had a
Oh,
question.
oh, that's my concentrating hard listening. I have many questions.
I'll wait for the next one. Different thing. And then we have the area committee, and I just looked up what area stood for, and then I forgot again. I know, I always wonder.
Regional Education Association, and what's the A?
Anyway, it's our agreement.
How about all school?
I don't know. It's our agreement that we have with Grantham and Plainfield, and also Portage, or just, I mean,
No.
just Grantham and Plainfield. But Grantham and Plainfield, because they send students to us in 7th grade and 9th grade. And so we have an agreement with them, which I think the last time we signed it for was for 10 years. Yes, our last agreement was just signed recently for a 10-year agreement with them, so that we are working together to support each other's students, as their students come to us. And then we have the school district and city task force. Steve, you want to tell us about that?
So this is an interesting group that brings together representation from the school board, and from the school district rather, and the city council. And it's really what I've witnessed is an opportunity to share what's going on at the city level and at the district level, and concerns that each entity has about each other, and a way of brainstorming and forming conversations about how to troubleshoot and problem solve.
Great, thank you.
I
So,
have- I have the words. Authorized regional enrollment area.
authorized
I got it before.
Excellent work, everyone.
Area sounds so much better.
Area does not matter, especially since area has area in it, which is annoying. So those are the committees. So generally, everyone serve on an equal number of committees. They meet at different times. The times of the board committees are not set in stone. The board members on those committees can meet together to decide on when they want to meet pursuant to the availability of the administrators. The committees that are not board committees, like SWAC, HACTC area, and city district task force, those are not decided by us because there are many more people involved. So those meetings are kind of set. They decide on the meetings at the meeting. They'll decide on the next meeting date, so when everybody's available then. But the kind of meeting, like it's a nighttime meeting or it's a quarterly meeting, that's up to them. So I think what we have done in the past is people have let the chair know of their kind of availability, what kind of job situation you have, what hours you absolutely cannot come, absolutely can come, or that sort of thing. I think what we're going to do this time is I'll send you all a Google Doc with all that, a Google form with all that information in it, so you can fill that all in instead of having to have 17 different emails coming. It will also probably ask you which are the committees that, off the top of your head that you prefer, which is one that you absolutely do not want to serve on, and I'll do my best. No promises about that, but we'll balance everybody's wishes as much as possible.
Maybe we could mention times, because that's important. So, is it on the list so people know? Okay. There's some flexibility with some of them.
Yeah, that's what you're saying. So there is some flexibility. The times, the general kinds of times are on your agenda. That's for the next meetings that are coming. On the Google form, I'll also put the times so you can see and the frequency, just so that you have an idea of what that is. Another thing is that all board members are assigned to represent a building in the district, and you need to represent a building that you do not have children attending school in that building. So another question I'll ask is, where are your kids going to be attending school next year? Or are they attending school now? So that we can assign people to buildings that they don't have children. And those assignments, there's 2 board members per building. Those assignments are, in addition to board budget time, you represent the interests of that building at budget time, but you also periodically visit and talk to that building administration when they want you to or when you want to. So that will be another assignment that will come your way. In addition to the committee assignments, you'll get your building assignments.
I have one question. When you assign, is it standard protocol for people who have done board things for longer than I have, that you can stay on a committee if you so desire, or is it standard that you would move along so that, I don't know?
I think, in my experience, I think it's beneficial to have a couple board members sort of be returning board members, but also have new board members, so that we don't all of a sudden have the 3 exiting members on the board, so I think a combination of both is often.
But as far as staying, I mean, again, if these are your preferences, right? If you really want to stay on SWAC, for instance, if you said that, just note that, right? Because I think that will help. It helps to sort of balance all of the things, but I think, yeah, you want to balance continuing and new board members so that there isn't just a vacuum of information going to some of these committees. Oh, in addition to that, each committee is going to have a chair of the committee, of the board committees. So the PNN, Personnel Negotiations, Policy, Education, and Finance and Facilities, that you all will elect your own chair and you'll elect your own secretary to take minutes at those meetings. So, in general, I think a good policy, to the extent possible, is for us to have sort of collaborative leadership, and so not to have any one person be chair of multiple committees, to share out the committeeship and to not have the chair be the chair of any of the committees, so that we keep the responsibilities spread throughout all of us, and we're all invested in getting the work of the committees done. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Again, apologies for not knowing the answer to this. I'm going to look like an idiot for a while. I'm sorry. We talk about policies, the policies committee. Can you give me an example of a policy? Because we talk about all different kinds of things, and a policy versus, like, I know what a policy means in certain contexts, but give me an example of what a policy is for the school district.
I will give you a good example right now of one of our board policies that we're going to talk about in a minute.
Is this the same thing as the school district policies that, okay, so these are the things that are updated all the time, and, okay, okay.
So for instance, we have policy BIA that is entitled New Board Member Orientation, right?
Okay.
So in that policy, it explains each new member will be provided access to these materials, and it lists what those materials are that you're going to have access to. So things like the location of the board minutes and agenda, a copy of the location of school board policies on the SAU website, right? That sort of thing. So all of these sort of things, it's already flagged in policy what you should be getting, right? Does that make sense?
It does. Can you give me an example of a policy that isn't related to the
Yep.
board?
I can. These I don't have in front of me, so I'll just pull it up. Unless you have one in front of you, Joanne.
So when you go to the SAU, the board, and then like board policies, they're grouped in sections. So it's like fiscal management, board governance, students.
I'm more familiar with board governance policies, and so I'm less familiar with the
So
things
so
that
they're
are.
all grouped. Like
Yeah.
you can go and see how they're grouped.
Sure.
But we sort of oversee all of them. All of those policies can come through the board. The board has to approve all those policies.
Mm-hmm.
So under, for instance, section G, which is personnel,
Uh-huh.
right, there are multiple policies with names like staff ethics, sexual harassment,
Okay.
employees
Okay.
and staff,
Okay.
right?
All right. Thank you.
Confidential
That's
student information.
There's a policy
That's
for
right.
it.
that was just sort of my question. I wanted to
Yeah.
make sure I was understanding that this is sort of all of the, there's a policy about all the different things that we did when we took our oaths and were fingerprinted, and those are all okay, all right. Just
Yes.
Thank you very much.
There are, as you might imagine, there are things, I try not to use the word policy, there are procedures that are not board policy. So how we process our payables, for example, I have an AP manual, that is not a board policy, and I don't want it to be a board policy. So there are things underneath board policies that are internal to the district that are usually written down, but anyway, those are not policies. And so with my staff, I try to make sure they don't say policy, because policy means something you guys are approved. We have a policy in how far kids have to walk to get to the bus, and all kinds of stuff.
Thank you very much. I have another question, which is about the HACTC committee. What does the committee do? I'm familiar with HACTC, and it sounds like the superintendent is involved in that, but so what does the committee actually do?
Well, we are all invested and pay for tuition to go to HACTC. So questions about staffing come forward to us because we have to approve if they're going to increase staffing. We talk a lot about budget. We talk a lot about their programs. We talk about attendance. We also celebrate at the end of the year. We get to see our students give presentations on what they've learned before they graduate and where they're heading out. So it's a very dynamic group, both Vermont and New Hampshire sending schools.
Great, thank you very much.
My only concern with me being with HACTC is that I'm a mental health provider and I'm concerned that it's an ethical issue if I were to be part of that committee.
So that's the kind of thing that you would indicate on the
Okay.
form, because
Okay.
that's really helpful, right?
Right,
any-
so
any-
just
any
when I put,
perceived- right,
I'll
any
put it at the
perceived
bottom and then
conflicts,
hash.
for sure.
Yeah.
Right, there'll be additional information, so.
Okay,
So,
yeah, that's all. I just wouldn't want there to be any sort of dual
Makes perfect
conflict
sense.
type
Yeah.
thing. Yep.
No, and that's really helpful too. We actually have a policy that we reveal conflicts and we have them. Good. Any other questions about committee assignments? No. Okay. Great, so you'll get an email with that information. If you can send it back in a timely manner, there'll be a deadline on it. It'll be pretty quick turnaround so that we can get these established pretty quickly. One thing, going back to that BIA policy, the new board member orientation, one of the things that policy says is that the board chair will assign a a board mentor to each new board member for the first year, so that you all have a mentor. It's not voted, it's just assigned. And so I would like to assign Wendy to be the board mentor, if you're all right with that, for the 3 new incoming people. So that means you can ask her any questions you want. You can, obviously you can ask any of us any questions you want, but if you have any particular information that you want to ask or you want to follow up and learn how this works, she's got more board experience of this board than most of us, so that would be a good. Does that make sense?
One question there, it's informed, there's like a limit on the number of people you can email.
Yes.
Before it becomes a thing.
Yes.
So, but the 4 of us, that doesn't approach that. Like, so we can all be on like an email thread and that doesn't approach.
Right. So when it's 5 or more board members on an email, that's considered a meeting, and that has to be public, right? So we don't do that unless the board emails the entire board, unless the board chair emails the entire board to inform you of a piece of information or something like that, but don't reply to all, right? So no reply to all.
And the type of information that we would be sharing, so we can't get into any discussions about anything that we might be discussing on our agenda. So it would be more like, you know, budget time, we have these things coming up, you know, sending you links of where to like go and get information versus like discussing details of information or opinions about different things. So like, right. So making sure that we don't tip into any discussion about board topics.
And that's the other reason why we don't reply back to something the board chair sends you, because then that might be considered discussion of said item, whatever that item is. So just keep that in mind. And again, we all make this. I mean, I made this mistake my first year. Replied all several times. It was a disaster. So don't do it. But we'll understand if you do, because it's easy to do. Other questions?
So, I don't know when we might have a conversation about, so we have 2 committee meetings that are already scheduled for April 3rd.
Right, so that was the next thing I want to talk about. So we have 2 committees that are scheduled for April 3rd. Our next regularly scheduled meeting would be the second Wednesday, which would be during break. So obviously, we can't have that break. We can't have a meeting during break. We could have a meeting a week from today. We could have a meeting 2 weeks from today. So either on the March 29th or on April 5th. If we have it on April 5th, then those 2 committee meetings that are meeting on April 3rd, we would need to have some people sub in for those committee meetings. Because, we might have the assignments by then. Hopefully we'll have the assignments by then. But it just is, it's putting it close to.
Well, so can I have a question on that? So of those 2 committees that are meeting, are there at least 3 current members on them? On
No.
Okay, because one, finance and facilities, there is though.
There's only the 2 of us.
Well, Lil was on finance and facilities.
Oh, well, yeah.
So that would be 3.
There would be 3.
So that would be enough to just meet and get it started, but it sounds like
There's
policy or education
Policy
is not.
only has 2.
Policy only has 2.
I won't be there.
So policy has 1.
I guess.
I'm sorry, I won't wait.
So maybe that one should be rescheduled. if
Well, I
it's
think
in the
that we're
order.
running into, Joanne, we're running into
Yeah, we don't have
timeline.
time, we have to bring the policies through twice.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
So I think, I mean, yes, we can get the assignments out pretty quickly. And if everyone is fine with that, getting the assignments out, that's fine. I think the other reason why it might behoove us to have a meeting either next week or the 5th before break is that then we have in the interim the Hanover Street School principal search is done, right? Or the application deadline is when?
We posted it and it's, I think it has a week and a half left or so.
So it'd be done by then.
Then the search committee will meet.
Right. So we might want to meet to talk about that process a little, given that.
I'm confused, I'm sorry. Which process?
The process of sorry, like, not a process in my mind, I'm getting confused with policy and procedure. No, the process of making that decision, just because we had talked before about when we were hiring
coordinator for student services. Yeah. Special education coordinator.
Special education coordinator. So she had been hired, the principal had been hired, the special education coordinator and the assistant principal had not been hired yet. And didn't she participate in the hiring of those two because that was her team, right? So I just wanted to talk about, since it's going to be the
Yeah, if Amy can-
incoming superintendent's team.
Right, if Amy has time and can come on the day that we are scheduling, that we've been organizing with her, that's fine.
Okay, that
I'm
would be great.
catching up with her April 6th, but we had a phone conversation last week, so I'd be happy to just chat with her and see what
Yeah,
works.
we could do that, and that would
Yes,
be
no problem.
great. Okay. Okay, that sounds good. Any other questions?
So are we meeting or?
Next.
Where did we leave off?
Right, so if you're comfortable getting the committee assignments, and if you have any questions getting back to me, I can get those back to people before the 3rd, well before the 3rd, so that you
I
would
think
know.
the only question is, and I don't have the policies in front of me, whether the board needs to approve those in a formal way. You know, usually the chair brings them forward, and I think the board generally gives a nod.
There's not a vote, though.
I don't think it says in the
I
policy.
don't
but
think
will
we
look.
vote like everyone is in favor of these committees.
I don't
Ever
recall there
remember
being a
doing
vote.
that?
I don't vote because I thought it was ultimately the chair's
Yeah, they
prerogative.
just send out a spreadsheet, like here's
It says
here's who and here's
just
where
says
you're at.
the
So
board
there's
approves.
no
Right.
vote.
It says the board.
I think so, but
I'm just looking, I'm looking for the.
The board could also make a motion to approval of where the chair puts people, send it out if you're in a bit of a rush.
Reviewing the policy.
We were just assigned.
Yeah, I think it's the chair's prerogative of who gets assigned to a committee, so I don't think we actually formally vote on the committee assignments. At least historically, I don't believe we have.
Since we have it in front of me, and as well, make sure. Yeah, so membership to each committee shall be recommended by the chair of the board for the approval of the board members.
So I'll make a motion to give Lil the authority to assign board members prior to our next meeting.
Okay, do we have a second? Steve seconds? Great, thank you. All those in favor? Excellent, unanimous. Thank you. But again, if you have questions, if you have concerns, be sure to email back. My goal is to get this out to you today and to get them back by Monday. So we should have them really soon. Okay,
Have we decided on that meeting, the next meeting?
Right.
so we have not decided on the next meeting. We are not going to meet again until the
26th.
26th.
So I guess, I mean, we had precedent last year. We actually met that first Wednesday in April, which this time around I think would be April 5th, so we didn't have to wait a whole nother month for a meeting, so, I don't, so,
That's what I think we should do.
right.
Joanne, Policy Committee will have met on the 3rd. Do we turn them around that quickly to bring to the board on the, I mean, that would be the only,
The only reason we meet would be
No.
to approve.
we wouldn't turn them around that quickly.
No.
So we would be bringing them to the 26th anyway.
Correct.
Okay.
But are there other things in the interim that we don't want to wait for a month?
I don't have any topics that need to come forward. We pushed the math program to tonight, knowing that we weren't, or thinking that we weren't going to meet, so that she could begin to do the budget for that. Tim, we don't have anything in regard to construction updates, in regard to your business updates. There would be a general superintendent update. We will be continuing the search for the principal, so there's nothing that we would report at that point either.
So we need a
So-
board member for that committee, though.
That's part of the conversation tonight.
Okay, so what do you all think now? Meeting on the 5th or not meeting on the 5th? That is the question we're having right now. Yes.
What's the process for calling, again, I I don't know what the process is for calling a board meeting that's not scheduled. If they need to be public, how does it work? If something happened and we needed to meet.
Emergency board meeting, that's usually what it's called, emergency board. And yeah, emergency board meeting is usually posted at least a day in advance.
Okay, so if we decided not to meet between now and the end of April, but something came up, we post a meeting and then we have a meeting and the world is right again.
Yep.
Okay.
A lot of power in this.
Right, but yes, we can do that.
Okay.
And Joanne, with the four of us coming, the new people coming to the SALT meeting, do you want that to happen in May after the 26th?
Yes.
Okay.
And for SALT, tell us what that means for those.
SAU leadership team.
You passed the test.
What is this?
SAU leadership team.
School
Administrative.
School administration.
So
Okay.
cool.
That's what we should create for new board members, is like that.
Acronyms, yeah.
No, that's part of the Easter egg
It's part
hunt
of
of
the-
coming and you get to feel like an idiot for a really long
It's actually listed on the
time.
three-year strategic plan, one of the back pages. We were asked to do that a while ago. So if you want to be treated, go to the back of that. Find it.
Okay, so then, in line with that, we need to decide on a board member to serve on the Hanover Street School Principal Search Committee. You said that those meetings are going to be during the day?
Yes.
Do you know what
Yeah, or-
approximate time?
We usually meet anywhere from 8:15 until 3:30.
So either that or I can do it.
I can do it if it's a Monday or Thursday.
I can do it any day of the week.
Okay. I don't know what day it's going to be. It just depends on the availability of people coming in. So whoever has the most flexibility is fine. And whoever would like to be on it, just let me know. Let you know.
Yeah, yeah, so can you all just send me an official email? And then when she knows the time, then we'll get back to you. Sound good? Great. All right. Any other committee discussion? That's what we're on right now. Okay, we're gonna go to committee updates really quickly. Finance and Facilities met on Thursday, March 9th. Would like to update us on Finance and Facilities. Our chair is no longer here.
I guess we met and we went over, what we had done the night before, we reviewed the renovation project progress at Mount Lebanon, so we skipped that, and then we went ahead and got an update on the progress for the high school and the Hanover Street School, of which all of that is on track, moving along. The meetings with the contractors and the city happened, the planning board actually happened last night, Monday night. And then we also started preliminary discussing the recognition for the track dedication and the type of recognition that we want to do, and have a temporary, are going to have like a, because of the timing of when the first track meet is in April, we are going to have a ceremony during the first track meet, but then we will have like temporary recognition until we can actually get a more permanent structure in place.
Thank you. Next meeting is scheduled for Monday, April 3rd at 4 p.m. Policy Committee, the next meeting is Monday, April 3rd at 8:30 a.m. I think you reported out the last meeting, so I'm not going to meeting it. Education Committee met on Monday, March 13th, and the next meeting is Monday, April 17th at 4:15 at the SAU office. At our last meeting, we talked about the math curriculum approval, and we met with the math curriculum adoption team and talked to them about that and their process, and asked many of the same questions you asked today about how they made their decision. PNN is to be determined, because this isn't on here, as I pointed out, which is good. SWAC is meeting, next meeting is Wednesday, May 3rd at 3:15. We've already had a report on the previous meeting. HACTC met on Tuesday, March 14th. Next meeting is Tuesday, May 9th at 9 a.m.
Do you want me to give an overview, Mary? So they have had a record number of applicants for most of their programs. They had 30 students that wanted welding and auto tech with only 16 slots available. The wait list for most of their programs is 10 to 12 deep. They're seeing an overall increase in interest in all of their programs over the last 5 years, and they're talking about how to manage it. Usually there's a lot of movement between now and the start of the year. About 40% of waitlisted students get into a program, and they're going to try to figure all of that out. We talked about how they make their decisions in regard to who goes where. The end of the year dates is accepted students' dates will be Wednesday, May 17th, and the awards are May 30th. And then they talked a bit about their facilities plans and their vision process that they're beginning to work on. And the end of the conversation was just a discussion about career planning and working with students and next steps.
What do our students do if they don't get accepted?
They go to school.
Just like all the other students do. It's not a given. It gets more competitive over time. These programs at one point, right, used to be considered BOTEC centers. Now they're state of the art. I've always loved our tech center, you can tell. And they are allowing students to get graduate credits, credentials. They can get jobs right after school. They can work in the summers. They can go to college and come back to the field. Harvard's done an incredible job with the former executive director, and Erica's been doing a great job too, continue to bring the program forward. It's very exciting.
So how many of our students get accepted versus don't get accepted?
I don't know the percentage because it depends on what they are going into, what the numbers are for each program.
Yeah.
And it depends on that year as well.
Is it first come, first serve? Or is it-
No, there's a process. Counselors are spoken with, and all kinds of things go into the conversation to make sure that the student's going to benefit most from the program, and also, do they really want to be in that program, to continue that program out. And they start students early on to get them going to visit the program and things like that. So we're really fortunate to be part of that tech center.
Thank you. All right, the area committee will meet next meeting is Tuesday, March 28th.
I have a correction. I apologize. I apologize for that. The area committee needs to change. Sydney emailed me because the snow day, they needed their vote to be that evening. So we don't have a date yet. And Sydney and I, because we're heading toward the end of March, beginning of April, we might just do an end of April one instead of a one in April and one in May, and do a collective thing. But I will let people know about that. So, thank you.
That's to be determined.
Yes, it is.
And the school district city task force, the next meeting is Thursday, May 25th at 6 p.m. at City Hall. All right, future agenda items, board member recommendations or questions? Yes.
I don't know that if this is something that would fall under the school district city task force, or, so I don't know if this is a committee item or a board item. But the city has expressed its intention to build a childcare center. We also have a very small preschool program in Lebanon that would benefit a lot more families than it currently serves. The difference between childcare and preschool is like non-existent / that. I'd love to understand what the best route for having conversations between the school district and the city take place on that. Whether that's a committee conversation, a board conversation, I don't know.
So I'm highly involved with that project, and the goal is that it is to represent many areas where there's no programs available, because what's happening is we have family and small center programs that actually have openings, but they don't have the staff. And so we could actually increase the staff by providing training and the current programs expanding. And what's going to happen with the Lebanon Center is the Boys and Girls Club are the ones who are going to be running that program. They've been hired to do that. And that program is basically birth through 5, they're talking about what those needs are. When we've talked about expanding our preschool programs for 3 and 4-year-olds, it's a mix of student needs. It's considered part special education program, regular education program. And the biggest thing that's a hurdle is the space. So we just renovated the Mount Leb School. There's not space to add an additional program to it. We used to have 2 programs running that wasn't effective. We looked at moving the program to Seminary Hill. Seminary Hill does not have the facilities in order to hold a preschool program. It's not compliant from everything from their stairs to the ramps to the toilets. So in looking at expanding a preschool program, the district would have to look at specifically the needs of the students coming through, because it's a very much so a balance of students with special needs and those without special needs. You would have to look at also your cost for increasing the staff. So a staff member is about $100,000 a year with probably a family package of benefits. So there's definitely conversations that could happen with the city, but it's kind of 2-tiered. One is what does this district want to do to increase the preschool program? That's a few days a week. And the program that they are looking at is a birth through 5, a early childhood, high quality, high accessible, which is a major problem. A lot of people can't afford childcare, even if there's a slot. We know that women and minorities are the ones that bear the burden of childcare most of the time, and they lose their ability to stay on track in their careers because of the fact that they're staying home with their children. Many people don't know that an early childhood educator makes $22,000 a year, that's it, with no benefits, no compensation. It's based on an annual rate, so that if a child is out of the daycare center, they don't get paid for that day. It's a horrific situation. It's very passionate about it in both Vermont and New Hampshire, working with the legislation to try to make that change. So I'm well versed in it, happy to make the connection. I worked with Sean. We did I helped him create the form that they use to determine which organization would run that program, and also working with him and Chris to work with the Upper Valley Education Association that represents Vermont and New Hampshire early childhood educators. So happy to talk more about it. I think the board would need to have something that's very clear as far as their ask in order to bring it forward to the city. But I know that's a lot more information, but just real passion of mine, and wanted to just let the board know about, the connections with that and within the district. There's also going to be a new program out in Randolph that's coming through. Dartmouth College and Dartmouth Health, very interested in childcare because they're hiring people and they can't come because they don't have childcare when they come into the Upper Valley. So it's highly connected with housing. And we're talking about the fact that when a development happens around a school, you get to know perhaps the number of children that might go into the school. We'd like to say the same thing that happens for developments. So how many birth through 5 children might live in that, and if they're developing it, perhaps they could add a child care facility too. So it's an exciting time to be talking about it. And once again, I'd be happy to bring anything forward that the board would like to propose.
And what's the best way to start considering what the board might want to propose? Is that, again, is that a committee topic? Is that a general board topic? How do we generally handle those things?
I think you talk about it and bring it to the correct facilities, which is a combination, I think, Lil, because it's a personnel and it's also facilities for space. Mm-hmm. But we have a preschool program that has a curriculum too.
And so would that then be, because we already have an existing program, we're talking about expanding.
Yeah.
Would that then be personnel more than, which would we say? Personnel
It's mostly facilities, because you could add a teacher or two to a budget and say we need more teachers. The issue is we don't have any place to put the program. So it would be a consideration for facilities. How many? What would it look like? What would the needs be? And go through there. And Katie Roach would be the perfect person to have that conversation with. She runs those programs.
I think part of the reason that I ask about the connection with the city task force and the build, I know that they're looking at building, and I don't know where in the stage of developing that plan they are, but it's always struck me that there's an awful lot of daylight in between announcing a plan and then it being implemented, and so it strikes me that it'd be interesting to know where they are, and be interesting to know because I know that the facilities is a big issue in terms of the preschool expansion. It would be interesting to know, what room in the plan for something that we're planning to build is there for possible,
The city has a plan. They've hired their architects. They're going to be locating it by the airport. It's probably going to be built within a year and a half. Recently, they applied for funds through Cluster that could give them the funding that they need besides the block grant funding. So they kind of had their ducks in a row before they went and got the okay, and they are moving pretty swiftly forward. So that's why I would encourage, if there's a proposal, to kind of think about that now and have the conversations. And once again, Katie would be great, a great advocate and a person to talk with about what that program might look like.
So is it appropriate then to request that it looks like the Finance and Facilities Committee is meeting Monday, April 3rd. How do general board members request that things be added to the agenda? How does that process work of requesting that something be considered or taken to a particular committee?
Usually we need to do it here because the members of that committee are here, right? So the chair of that committee doesn't exist right now because he left. And so, but Steve, MJ, and I are currently on that committee. So, and some of us will stay on it right, going forward. So I think that's probably the easiest way is to suggest that it be added. That agenda is made by Joanne though, so.
Yeah, we have never said we can't add something to the agenda from a board. We welcome that, actually. And so then we just add it as a topic, and we talk about why are we bringing this forward, what do we need to do, and then kind of the person connects the dots behind the scenes and preps it.
Great.
So my sense is you're officially asking Finance and Facilities to look into potential partnership with the Lebanon ECE facility. And then we could talk about that in April, get a clearer sense, and I'd be happy to talk about that with Sean.
And if it's is it appropriate to also, you've suggested that Katie Roach be included in those conversations. Is it appropriate to formally request that?
Yeah, I'll just call her, she'll pop by.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yep.
So I have just because you had mentioned something, when I was at the planning meeting the other night, they were talking about another proposal that was coming before the planning committee, and they talked about waiving the impact fee for the school. Like, when do they do that? Why do they do that? I couldn't.
For the Frito-Lay building?
It was happening, and I wasn't really, he was like reading something. It sounded like it was a request from a developer or something like that. So I can't give you any details, but it sounded like that request was.
It would be in the very beginning of the minute. We read 3 proposals, and one of those proposals said they have asked to waive the impact fees.
For the schools.
Sort of blew right past it and went on to the next thing.
I know this has come up before with other developments before the planning board, and that's usually something that the developer requests, and sometimes the planning board agrees to as a way of enticing developers to build.
Well, I'm just curious what our.
Tim can contact Tim Corwin, because that's the quickest way to get an answer.
Okay.
We'll get back to you. But
And just if they have like
to our
I
attention.
mean, I can understand it being a typical request, but how do they actually determine whether to do that or not? And do we ever get notified of that?
The answer to that would be, if they've done it, then no. I mean, within your tenure. But as I mentioned in the last board meeting, we're not giving any heads up as to when impact fees are being paid either. It's like a precedent. So they worked hard on changing the city charter to increase impact fees, but it lives in the city's world. It doesn't mean that they can't notify them. I think it's a good conversation to have. But
Really good.
we are not notified of anything impact fee when they come down.
But it's certainly when that is up for discussion at the planning board, any of us can go and speak as citizens and, question
Well, that's what- I mean, I was
the
surprised.
implications for the school district.
Right, I mean, we just happened to be there, so and we don't typically have somebody on the board pouring through those planning
board agendas.
committee agendas or proposals, so I was just like, wait, what did he just say? And I know that we've often talked about sometimes the city feels like some of these structures won't create students into our school system, and we're not quite sure what that reality would be. So that it might be interesting to see what their approving or not approving.
Joanna had a question about the child care center and if the residents of Lebanon will be given precedent. Oh, it'll
No,
be
no.
just like, no?
No.
Interesting.
I think the concept is to support the Upper Valley. The business, business, it's like the business of children, right? When we talk about our budget, it's about our children. And businesses are getting impacted so much by the lack of childcare that the concept is to provide an Upper Valley place for people to have childcare. The city itself is having a difficult time bringing in staff to work for the city, but they're not, my understanding is they're not giving their own staff priority either. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm not part of that end of it, but he has not mentioned anything about a priority for a certain group. And I don't know how he's going to make that decision because Sean hands it off to the Boys and Girls Club as the people who run it. And so they would have to have the responsibility of determining the children that go into the program. And I don't know how far along they are. I think it was just a month or so ago that they announced that Boys and Girls Club were going to run it.
Yeah, no, I saw that.
Yeah.
So does that mean the Boys and Girls Club pays the taxes for the building?
I don't know. I'm not at that part of it. I don't know if they'll pay partial or how that works, or staffing. There's a lot to it. He has done this in Allenstown before. So Sean has experience working with Boys and Girls Club, had done that in Allenstown, so it's not new to them. And I wouldn't be part of those kind of conversations. I'm not quite sure.
Right, and I think that they're locating it in their TIF district.
Yeah, airport.
And what's the, just to kind of piggyback on that, what is the appropriate way for I mean, it does strike me that this is a relevant matter for the school board and for the sort of Lebanon school district. It does involve a segment of children who would in theory be part of our early childhood education program. If it's going through age 5, we have 3, 4, and 5-year-olds in our district. So it strikes me that this isn't something that's irrelevant to the school board. And so wouldn't participation from, it sounds like you're involved in some aspects of it, which is great.
I'm involved in it separately as a public member, not as a superintendent, because I just passionately believe what children experience birth through 5 has an enormous impact 5 through the rest of their lives. And so I'm part of it, not because of a superintendent, just because of my interest in it. The joint task force would be meeting in May, so that would be a conversation for the joint task force to say to the city, what does your program look like? We've heard about it. We know you're building it. Will it have an impact for the Lebanon Public School? Or I know that he's opening it up to anyone who has an interest in it. How is the Boys and Girls Club going to organize it? What does that look like? So it impacts us. It impacts Mascoma. It impacts any local school district. That we have parents who drive an hour each way outside of here just to get daycare. So it impacts all the way up to Thetford. It has it's a bi-state issue that we really need to focus and resolve. So from a school district perspective, there's two. There's the facilities part, if you want to replicate something, and then there's this joint cities task force to ask the city, what does that look like? It's going to be built in Lebanon. What does there have any impact in our school district? So there's kind of two paths for that.
I wonder too if the next meeting of that task force isn't until the end of May, and it sounds like they're powering through quite briskly. I wonder if it would be appropriate for the school board to reach out to I don't know who's on the task force, or reach out to Sean or something to sort of have a conversation about that on the sooner end rather than waiting. I guess that's a question for the board chair.
That's a good question.
You don't need till April 26th as a board if you wanted him to come and have a bit of a conversation.
Yeah.
I think he sees it separately, honestly. It's a city-run business that he's finding the funding, but he could come and talk about it.
So she's saying we can have the city manager come to our April 26th board meeting and talk to us about the project, and we can ask him questions directly as a full board, which I think is probably a good idea because that is still a month before the joint city task force meets. So if that works. get some of the questions answered. And then we would also be able to talk about, like you're saying, what are the next questions, or where would we be asking the next questions? Where does the conversation go from here?
So
Yeah.
can I propose, and based on that, I mean, it seems like it's a little too premature to go to finance and facilities next meeting, that finance and facilities would benefit much more to hear from the city if they can come to the April 26th meeting, and then in time have Katie go to the next finance and facilities meeting in May or whenever that may be, because I think there's a little.
I think there might actually be two separate issues there, though, because I think that the preschool in general issue, I think, and the possible expansion or just sort of looking at that issue, I think is a finance and facilities issue, no matter what happens with the ECE facility. So I think the questions about the ECE facility and having Sean come and talk to us sounds great, but I don't know that we need to wait in terms of having the finance and facilities committee start to consider these topics, the topic of the preschool separately. They're related, but also not.
I mean, I think it's worth talking about finance and facilities, and if we determine, because as Joanne pointed out, since there obviously are two paths forward, they're not separate, they're interrelated, but the question of facilities availability for us is an us question, right?
Right. So I mean, I guess it would be nice, though, as a current finance and facilities member, to have a little more background, to have a little more context and robust conversation. And I feel that there isn't quite the sense of urgency. We could wait until May, only because there will be no expansion. The budget has already been just set and approved for next year, so we would need to have everything done, I agree, before the fall budget discussions. But I think we have some time at our May meeting to do this, and in the meantime get ourselves up to speed and educated on everything that's going on.
I think, and you all can, other FNF meeting, other FNF members, current FNF members can say what you think. I mean, I think you're right. I think the more information we have, the more better discussion we're going to have, and the more information we're going to have. But I think also it would help us, since we know we have a meeting on the books, to also make a list of questions to guide that information, right? Like, to guide the information we're going to get back. Because I think right now, it's probably not 100% clear what it is that we're even asking about. And so to have that meeting where we talk about the discussion, what is the questions that we want, and then we'll have an additional meeting where we have more information from Sean and then more information back from.
I think we also need to understand, potentially from Joanne and Katie, what is the state of our current, I mean, so maybe that's the first conversation to have at Finance and Facilities, is like, what is the current state of our pre-K program? Do we have kids on, I mean, I'm assuming we have to.
Students on wait lists.
You know, so getting an idea of like, have we actually outgrown our program, and do we need to start having conversations about expansion?
If you ask Katie, she's always going to say, we need to expand our program. There's always students with special needs. There's always children that would really benefit from the early socialization, the early academics, the structure. So there's no doubt, there's always a need. And the district has to figure out balancing K-12 and 3 and 4-year-olds, how we want to expand the program. When we're looking at expanding the program, you're looking at personnel and you're looking at facilities.
Right.
Those are the two, if you want to call them, barriers that come right up front.
Yep.
The people will come if the program is there, and we have the ability to run a program. I honestly think the expansion of a program, the running of a program, is something you're going to want to talk about in the fall. It's not something you want to pick up now at the end of the school year with my transitioning out. You're better off bringing that up as this is a budgetary topic that you want to talk about, and your goal setting for meeting, make that a board goal that you want to look at the early childhood program next year. Then you figure out what committees it would best land in. Then you figure out at your retreat, what are the targeted things we really want to talk about. The ECE facility was not meant for the Lebanon School District. It was meant for a solution for the child care crisis. It's one solution. It's not the only pathway. We need to look at multiple pathways in order to really solve the problem and provide high quality, accessible early education to all families. So where the board piece is be the early preschool. I'm sure Sean can give you an update in the fall where he is, but he didn't build it thus that the school district would have a relation or a connection to it. He's doing it individually. So, you know, he will also know more in the fall than he's going to know now, where he's just starting out and trying to find the funding for it. They haven't really talked about the holistic philosophy or anything like that. It's just at the very beginning stages. Also, what the board can do is keep your eye on Act 237, called the Momnibus, that's gone through its first stages. There's a bill that Sean put through about tax appropriations and trying to decrease taxes for people who are running early child care centers. We don't think that's going to get through, but as the board knows, I've been continuously emailing you almost over abundance of legislation, legislation. That's your power, is legislation. And this board has not done a lot with showing up and being vocal at meetings, not a lot with writing. You can combine with other districts. You know, I push out stuff all the time, and getting 100 to 200 people clicking a button that the pre-letter is already sent and you just click it. It's huge when I talk to Susan Prentice and others that people actually wrote. And even if it's a pre-done letter, clicking it is huge. And you know, I would love to see the board, I've been talking about it for years, take a more active stance on what's happening with the voucher bills, what's happening with divisive concepts, what's happening with the parental rights bill that just came through. These are things that impact our students and our families on a daily basis, and it's time for school boards to really read multiple papers every day, to get part of the reaching higher that I keep sending everybody. This is the latest updates. That's a powerful thing that you could put on your goals for next year and really make a difference, not only for Lebanon, but for the state of New Hampshire. I think it's really important in looking at the qualifications of the people around this table. You are the group that could really make a difference, be really powerful.
So can I ask a question? So when we're having the preschool conversation, part of the reason we created the preschool program is because we're opting to, I think it was we're required, the kids who are identified as in need prior to entering school, we have to provide services for those children.
Right, and they don't have to be in a program. They could be in a program anywhere. We would deliver the services to them. But it's much more effective and better for a child to have the services right there throughout the day. So they're with their typical and atypical neuromotor peers. And so that's incredibly important too.
Right.
So there's two fabulous groups of children that we're trying to support. Those who are identified and those who aren't. And we do have waiting lists. And that would be a conversation about, do we want to increase that?
So I think understanding what we're required as a district to provide for services.
You just have to provide the services in an IEP. You do not have to provide a program. Hanover doesn't have an early child care program. Many of them don't. So what happens is you take your SLPs and your OTs and your learning specialists and you say, I'm going to go over to what was Green Mountain and I'm going to provide that service for a half hour. And the school sometimes on an IEP will pay a portion of the entire day, sometimes the entire day. That's the special ed lens of it.
Yep.
But it's something that we've been very proud of here in Lebanon.
Right.
We are also very proud of our intensive needs program. And people, if you want to talk finances, we save millions of dollars because our children aren't out of district, and out of district costs $350. But my heart is they're here in our community with their families, with their peers, growing and learning. They have an opportunity to go into the regular classroom, come back and get the supports they need. So our intensive needs program is another thing that we do that's unique, but it's wonderful for our children, it's wonderful for our parents. And could we expand that? Perhaps, but we have students that come in and they have a certain, let's say, need set, and then they're determined to go into our extensive needs program. You don't have to have an intensive needs program, and many schools don't.
Yeah.
So our preschool program is kind of like our intensive needs program, and we love it. But it's not something that's mandated by the state to have. So you can't say the state told us we have to do this and now we have to expand.
But they require us to provide the services.
But you
Like,
could
so we're
try-
financially responsible for the services that are identified.
They don't have to be in a program that's 3 or 4 hours long.
Yep.
The SLP could drive over to
Yep.
Hanover Nursery School and provide 45 minutes of speech.
Yep.
And then drive to the next place, which many schools do. And so that's the difference. You can't say we have to have a program, you say we have to provide the services for the IEP.
Okay.
So Jessica and then Steve had raised hands a while ago, so I don't know if you still had comments that you're.
It's been completely lost in this excellent conversation, and I'm very grateful to everybody for being so engaged. I think it's an incredibly important topic, and I feel like we have the opportunity to do some really exciting things in the way that, and I just feel like there are some non-traditional ways of providing services and developing programs, and I want to compliment the team that's in place and for everything that they've done. They are amazing. They have created an absolute oasis in their program, and it is something that Lebanon should be incredibly proud of. And so just I probably burst into tears talking about how wonderful they are. So I want to give them all the props in the world, but also that's as a parent. So I thank everyone for their attention to this, and I hope that the committee conversations and the task force conversations are productive, and I think we've got some interesting options in front of us, so thank you.
Yeah, the only comment, which is much less feel good, because I can't compete with that, is from a committee perspective. I think it's premature to talk at finance and facilities. You know, that tends to be a very nuts and bolts problem-solving kind of committee. We don't know the ask yet. We don't know what we need to find space for. We know we need to expand, but there really isn't a program proposal yet to discuss. So I think that probably needs to be worked on a little bit before it gets to that kind of nuts and bolts committee.
I think I agree. I mean, I'm two minds with that, and I do understand the idea of having Sean come later. I think having Sean come now, though, might help us to determine what questions we need to ask. So I think that would be, I think if we start with him and the 26th, and then we'll have a better sense of which committee, which questions, what we're asking.
We do also have it is an existing program. So I think to the extent that we're talking about finance and facilities, this isn't an unknown.
Right.
We
But
do have
I guess, are we looking to expand by needing to find 5 spaces, or
I think-
is it 35 spaces, or do we need 4 classrooms? I guess those are the kinds of questions that.
Isn't that the kind of question that the committee would help put some shape around, though?
I think where we need to start is just having, I mean, it's been great for Joanne to speak about these programs. I think with so many new board members, I don't know if it's a next agenda item or a finance and facility, like just getting a broad framework of the programs that we have and sort of, what are they serving? What kinds of wait lists do we typically have for these programs? And just a general board education moment for these programs that are.
Which we could also do on the 26th, right? I mean, we could
Right.
either before or after we talk to Sean.
Maybe
Maybe before.
before. Before would be great.
Yeah, before we talk to Sean. So before, does that make sense?
You like, if I'm hearing, and my brain is going through, I'm at a conference on the 26th, and then I let the board know I'm being involved the next week, so I want to make sure to organize the next 2 board meetings. What I'm imagining is my having a conversation with Karen Woolsey, who's the Director of Student Services, and we would map out what do we provide under student services. And those are things like 504, nurses, school psychologists, that like a framework. And then have Katie talk about our preschool program. And I think the 2 of them combined, and I would love Carrie to come and talk about our intensive needs program, because that's over at Hanover Street. So you would get an idea of the services that we provide that are unique to the district, why they're unique, talking to the people who run those programs. So you want to first learn what we're doing internally before you begin to look at what might happen externally. I completely organized that for the 26th. I don't know if at that time you want John to come too and talk about the ECE, and so make it a combined, it's very short and succinct, and he'd probably come in, and I think he'd want to be first because he's so busy if he's available on the 26th. I think it's really important to him to have questions from the board in advance. That works most effectively for him. So I'll be sending out a Google Doc that I share with him and say, here are the board's questions about the ECE concept so that he can be best prepared.
I think that works. Sorry, not to interrupt. I think that works as long as we go into that with the understanding that we may ask him back in the fall with more detailed questions, but we don't know.
That would be up to the board.
Right.
You know, that would be up to him. I'm going to be writing a note out about ECE work if parents are interested in becoming part of the listserv. And I'm also going to be noting that there's going to be an ECE conversation with Sean, with the ECE providers, via Zoom. So there's a link that if you're interested in hearing directly from the providers in his conversation back, you're going to learn the same thing that you're going to hear here. We are going to set up the date. It's a way for me as a superintendent to connect our Lebanon community, what's happening with the ECE bigger idea. So for those of you who are interested, my superintendent letter that's going out, I'll put that in there. And I'll also have, if you're interested in being a board parent member on the Hanover Street School search, to email me and Diane, and we'll get that set to you. So that email should go out Thursday, my letter should go out Thursday or Friday, and I'll put those 2 points in.
When you do the overview, can you also include the number of staff, the facility space that it takes up, and the cost of those programs, just so we get a general?
I can try.
I mean, I don't need the
know how
detail, but
much
like,
I can do. I mean, there's two preschool teachers, and then the pairs depend on if the student needs a one-on-one or not. So that's going to depend.
well, just a ballpark of how much those programs currently cost, and then we do have students who are tuitioning. There's half of that. So like, how much do we get for in the lottery system for the preschool program? I believe that we're
Yes.
getting money from that.
It's,
No, I know,
It's-
but just an idea of how much we offset that cost with.
Incredibly generous.
Right. Oh, I,
$75.
yeah. Sawyer loved it, so.
All right, does that make sense? Does that answer your questions? That
thank you.
process makes sense so far?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other, we're on future agenda items, board member recommendations or questions.
Just for the minutes, that I might be at a conference on the 26th, and I let people know I will be here for the first meeting in May. My last meeting will be the 4th meeting or second meeting in May.
The 4th week.
So that you can invite the new superintendent, Amy Adams. I think that just works best because you're going to be goal planning. So I let her know. I think that would be great. I don't know her availability, but when I catch up with her next, I'll give her the date. But I think that
So,
just makes sense.
I think other agenda, it would be great to also get an overview from you, from her, from both of you, like your exit strategy or plan and her onboarding plan.
So I met with her for an hour. We're going to catch up again, and she has my cell phone number. And, I think that's the best thing. You plant too much in someone's head and you leave and they're like, I don't know what you told me back in May because it didn't wrap my brain around it. So we have that. I have a bit of a chart with who's who in the organization, who knows what. Everyone knows that when I got my new laptop, I lost 9 years of documentation. It's gone. But I've shared it with multiple people, so if she's looking for something, she can find it. So that's kind of the transition plan. But I know myself coming in, just having someone's cell phone to say, did you have any background information on this? This came up, is helpful. I also want to make sure I'm stepping away, so she has an opportunity to come in and freshly take the district wherever she wants to go. So that's my plan, and I'm certain that you will probably assign a mentor to her, and that the more people she has to help, the better.
So you were saying that the second meeting in May, you're saying that at the retreat, goal making?
No,
No. That's what I was just confused.
no, I apologize. I'm not here the next October. Same month, Joanne. April meeting, and I let the board know in advance with my mom, I will be at the first May meeting. The second May meeting is my last May meeting. The June meeting, which would be the
June 7th,
first,
June 14th.
The
right,
14th.
is usually the retreat. And that's where I thought it'd be great if Amy could come and talk with you guys and develop your goals together, and do it that way.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I misunderstood what you said, so I just wanted to clarify.
Trying to talk too fast.
Okay, any other future
I
agenda
have
items?
a question. I don't know if there's somebody else that I need to come to with this. This is, so I'm part of the Lebanon City's DEI, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission. And on Juneteenth, there is a steering committee, and they would like to have an educational piece of, there's a documentary, and I can get you the name, and it's around slavery in New Hampshire, reparations, particularly in Portsmouth. They would like to provide that to the community for free. They're having a hard time knowing where they can have the screening, so it was brought up to see if there could be a possibility of the auditorium at Seminary Hill.
Yes.
I wasn't, okay.
So that fits about 300 people.
Okay,
And you could email me, and then I can connect you with
Yep.
our folks at the facilities.
Awesome.
And then you can let them know what the needs are, things like that, and you can organize it.
Awesome.
I think we have the MOU with the city that they don't pay for use of the facility, so that's not an issue.
okay.
Just looking at the dates and times, you want to make sure that it's not a time when there's basketball up above.
That's true. We know
So
that
just
it's
check on that.
Juneteenth, on the
Yeah.
actual 19th was
I
when we
think it
want to
should
have
be
the
fine.
educational piece. Okay, so I know the date, but I think we can be
Please feel
fairly
free,
flexible.
just reach out to me.
Okay, all right, sounds good.
Anything else?
We need to close public comment.
Yes, I'm getting, we're not there yet, right? I have it written down. So our next school board meeting, as we finally decided, is Wednesday, April 26th at 6:30 PM here. Our additional piece of business is that we need to close public comment. So we tabled it.
So we need to, I don't know what the motion, do we bring it back to the
Yeah.
table?
Yeah, so we make a motion to reopen public comment. Can I have a motion to reopen public comment?
I'll make a motion to reopen public comment.
And a second, Steve, second, Wendy makes the motion. We're opening public comment. Is there anyone in the room who wants to give public comment? Anyone on Zoom?
No hands raised.
No hands raised. All right, so now we need a motion to close public comment. Steve makes the motion to close public comment. MJ is gonna second it. All in favor? Okay, yes. That's 9-0, sorry, it was on the other side. 9-0. Steve?
My turn?
Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Steve, second by MJ, all in favor? Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you.